ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. In 1755, the Cherokees actually pushed the Creek Indians down. This was Creek land before the Cherokees got here. Believe it or not, they pushed them. There was a battle near Canton, Georgia, called the Battle of Tallywa, where the Cherokees actually pushed the Creek Indians down to the Chattahoochee River, and that became the border between the Creek and the Cherokee Nation up in the time of the removal. 1836 for the Creeks and 1838 for the Cherokees. By the way, in that battle at 1755, this is where we come across this lady, the beloved war woman of the Cherokees, Nancy Ward. And her husband, Kingfisher, is actually killed in that battle while she's loading a rifle. Yes, they had muzzle loaders back in 1755. These Indians are not using bows and arrows like we think about on TV, I think, or the movies. It's a whole lot different thing in historical fact. Now, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to 1791. The Cherokees had been driven into the land because most of them fought on the side of the British in the Revolutionary War, of course. And in 1791, they signed a treaty called the Holston Act, where they agreed to become more, quote, civilized. I have a little problem with that because I think they were already civilized. They became much more like the white men. And you'll see later on, this is really, believe it or not, it's a government plan. It seems real strange at the time. We don't think about politics being that way back, that far back, but it was.
That's not surprising.
No, it's not, really not. But in 1791, they signed the Holston Act, thinking they're going to be able to stay here if they become more, quote, civilized. Actually, more like the white people. They're already civilized. They've got their own culture. In 1802, Georgia, you would not have recognized the state of Georgia. It used to be a wide state. It used to be where Mississippi and Alabama is today. And right along there was a little river called the Yazoo River. And right along the Yazoo River, a bunch of Georgia legislators, they bought and sold land there. And they enjoyed doing it so much they kept doing it. The same land of different people. Now, what we call that today is called land fraud. Mm-hmm. Do you know what they called it back then? Land fraud. It's still the same thing. And when that happened, the federal government stepped in and said, wait a minute, Georgia, y'all keep selling land to people that doesn't belong to you. And so they said, we've been talking to France, and we're going to double the size of the United States. We're going to make a sale this year in 1802. It's called the Louisiana Purchase. We're going to double the size of the United States. And Georgia said, wait a minute, if you're going to double the size of the United States, what are we getting out of the deal? You're taking that land away from us to do that with. And they said, well, what do you want? And they said, we'd like for you to remove the Cherokees and the Creeks from North Georgia so we can have their land. And in 1802, they signed a paper called the Georgia Compact. And in the Georgia Compact, the federal government promised the state of Georgia that they would remove the Cherokees and the Creeks as soon as they could peacefully. This is the beginning of the Trail of Tears. And the president that signs this paper in 1802, here's the shocker. It's Thomas Jefferson, who gets no credit for this removal at all. Well, time rolls on. 1817, a group of Cherokees, they leave and they get mad. They're called the Chickamaugas. Earlier times, their chief was Dragon Canoe. And he'd fought against the white people many a time, trying to save his land. And after he died out, though, the group, they decided they would leave. Now, later on in our history books, we call them the Old Settlers. Now, they leave and they go out to what's now Arkansas from a treaty that was signed in 1817. Well, in 1827, the Cherokees up at New Echota come up with their own written constitution claiming they're a sovereign nation. Georgia says, oh no, y'all can't be a sovereign nation. The federal government was supposed to remove y'all, and they didn't. So now we have to. States' rights is a big issue, of course. We're leading up to the war between the states, or what we call the Civil War, I guess, in the history books. But I had a little old lady from Vicksburg one time and told me, she said, sweetheart, there was nothing civil about that war.
That's true.
And she's right about that, too. But when that happened, they started placing unfair laws on the Cherokee people. First law they passed was it was illegal for any Cherokee to to sell, it was illegal for any Cherokee to testify against a white man in court. I thought that was a strange law. And then they passed another law because in 1828 they found gold up in this little place they called Dahlonega. Dahlonega, I was told, is a Cherokee word for yellow rock. Yep, they found gold in 1828. When they did that, they were not going to let the Cherokees have the gold either. They passed another law. Oh, by the way, since you're Cherokee, you can't mine gold on your own land.
It all comes back to land and gold.
Greed.
Greed.
It's the whole thing.
That's right. Yeah.
And do not let anybody kid you. Everybody talks about the gold and everything. The gold here was the land. These people, in 1805, up at the Chief Van house up there, Chief Van and him had built the first, this is in up at Chatsworth Spring Place, he had built the very first 3-story brick plantation house. He had 110 slaves. He farmed 800 acres of land. He was the richest of the Cherokees in 1805. First brick house. It's just unbelievable. And I mean, it's a 3-story brick plantation house in 1805. Well, in 1821 too, something else I'd like to backtrack a little on. There was a gentleman, his name was Sequoyah. And Sequoyah actually invented the Cherokee syllabary, what we call, some people call it an alphabet, but it's actually a syllabary. It's based on actual sounds. It's not based on individual letters. But there's 86 symbols for that. And it's an amazing thing that he did. It was really something else, Sequoyah was. And by 1828, about the time the gold was taken off there, the Cherokees published the very first Native American newspaper called the Cherokee Phoenix right up there at New Echota.
I love that place.
And believe it or not, it was bilingual. It was written in Cherokee and in English in 1828.
If you've not gone to New Echota, you
please
really
do.
need to go. It's up on
Please do.
225
Yep.
in Calhoun, our neighbors, Gordon
Yep,
County.
Gordon County.
And it's a fabulous place to go.
It's a fabulous place. It really is. It's great. The original Worcester house was up there. Samuel Worcester was the missionary. For any of you who've studied law, probably one of the first court cases you ever study is Worcester versus Georgia. And I'm coming to that. After the law in 1828 was passed, they passed another law that I thought was really odd. It said it was illegal for any white man to be in the Cherokee Nation without a permit. Now, this is a Georgia law, not a Cherokee law. Now, did they get rid of the settlers? Of course not. They started arresting the missionaries because they were teaching the Cherokees how to read and write. I've been told that the literacy rate for the Cherokee Nation at that time period was higher than the state of Georgia. Most of them could read and write in English and in Cherokee. The Constitution that they wrote in 1827, it was bilingual too. It was written in Cherokee and in English because they wanted to make sure they were not misunderstood. As it went along, they arrested the missionary up at New Echota, Samuel Worcester. He was sentenced to 3.5 years of hard labor. Went down to Milledgeville. There's actually a box in the History Center, I think it's where it's at, that Mr. Worcester, the missionary, made that was up there. Samuel Worcester helped to make the newspaper, and he was a friend of the Cherokees. He helped them tremendously.
And his house up there at New Echota, is that the original house?
That is the original
house.
Yeah, that's the only original building that's up there. Now, the Vance Tavern was moved from Gainesville, Georgia, where Lake Lanier is at today down there. And now that's the oldest building there at New Echota, but it was moved. And the other buildings are actually copies of a couple of cabins that were moved in from Calhoun and other places. And the small Rogers cabin, it was moved in and then put together from a couple of other buildings there.
Okay.
It's just amazing. But Mr. Worcester, while he was in prison, the Cherokees, knowing that they were being treated unfair, a lot of people think, well, they must have went on the warpath. No, they did something far worse. They hired a lawyer.
Always lawyers involved.
Always lawyers in politics. Exactly right. And his name was William Wirt. William Wirt went all the way up to Washington City. That's what they used to call Washington, D.C. And they filed charges in 1831, but they failed because a Cherokee couldn't testify against a white man in court. So William Wirt, he's being paid this good money. He doesn't really know exactly what he's going to do, and he runs across the Supreme Court judge up there, John Marshall. And John Marshall says, let me see this case and let's see what we can do with this. He said, I might find something that might help you. And sure enough, he did. They said a few weeks later, he called William Wirt back in and said, Mr. Wirt, I think I found something that might help you out. He said, what? He said, Cherokee can't testify against a white man in court. How's that supposed to help? He said, well, you're right. He said, well, what if we had a white man that could testify? And that's when they thought of Samuel Worcester, the missionary. And sure enough, they sued in 1832 and won the court case.
Oh.
Worcester versus Georgia. Very famous court case. And this is where we all hear about Andrew Jackson making the statement, oh, well, John Marshall's made his ruling, we'll let him enforce it. You see, the Supreme Court cannot enforce the laws. They don't have an army. They don't have a police force. So when the presidency, Jackson by this time in 1831 had already passed the Indian Removal Act. And he was not going to go back on that. So the Cherokees were really doomed. They thought they'd won a great victory, but they hadn't.
Right.
Well, then of course they start dividing the Cherokee Nation up. And I had a talk once with a class from Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and a group from Cherokee, North Carolina. And I asked them about which side they thought was really good. Either the treaty side, which was the Major Ridge and John Ridge, and Elias Bootnott, who was the editor of the newspaper there at New Echota, the Cherokee Phoenix. And they started arguing right there in front of me. And I said, do y'all not realize the old ways that battles took place? How countries took over other countries? They said, what do you mean? I said, divide and conquer. I said, they took the treaty from a group of people they knew were not in charge to divide y'all up, and y'all are still divided even today. I said, it must work pretty good. Mm-hmm. They were shocked. They had never looked at it. A lot of the young students had never looked at it that way. It's all politics. It really is. It's all politics.
Everything's politics.
Don't let anybody kid you. It's all about the politics. And I'll tell you, it's really sad. When the treaty was signed, December 29th, 1835, at New Echota, at Bootnott's house. Bootnott's real name was Bucku Wadey. He was actually Major Ridge's nephew. And he was the editor of the newspaper there at New Echota. But that's where the treaty was signed. When the treaty was signed, they said Major Ridge stepped off the porch at 1 o'clock in the morning and turned around with the rest of the Cherokees. Only about 20 people signed the treaty of New Echota. And he said, I have signed my own death warrant. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is there was a law that said it was illegal for any Cherokee. This was a Cherokee law. It was illegal for any Cherokee to sell land to the white man without the majority of the Cherokee people agreeing with it, and the penalty was death. Now, what people don't realize, he'd helped create that law. And he'd actually went out and helped kill a man whose name was Doublehead because he'd sold off 1 million acres of land and kept the money for himself, not for the Cherokee Nation or the Cherokee people. And but now here's something that people don't realize, and this is going back to the treaties and looking back at things again. When Jackson tells them that he's not going to do anything, he's going to let John Marshall enforce the law. Georgia, knowing that that Andrew Jackson's not going to do anything, the federal government's not going to do anything, they go ahead and have a land lottery. You can look it up. It's the Cherokee Land Lottery of 1832. Do not let anybody kid you. This is when they took the land away from the Cherokee people. Now, a lot of people think that the settlers didn't move in here till after 1838.
No, because I know of a family in Stylesboro that was there earlier than that.
Well, guess what? Guess when Rome was established? 1834. Mm-hmm. Guess when Cave Spring was established? 1832. Mm-hmm. So the people are already coming in here. They're not waiting for the Cherokees to leave. They're coming in here claiming their land, telling them to move. Up at New Echota, I know you've seen between the Supreme Court house and that small cabin over there, there's a signpost. It says land lot 124 and 125. That's 160 acres of land. And if you turn around right there and look at it, that's the whole town of New Echota. Wow. And it's got the actual permit there where they won the land lottery for the whole place. It's just amazing. they came in and took over. The Cherokees had to go up to up above Tennessee near Chattanooga, Red Clay, and they had to meet up there. They were not even allowed to meet there. The 2 summer routes had already been taken when they in the summertime, the ones that they'd stopped them on, and so by the time they got Mississippi River, it was frozen over. And that's where we lose a whole lot of the Cherokee people there. A lot of them don't actually make it to what's the Indian Territory until March of 1839. Now, listen, we talked about the Chickamaugans earlier, what we call the old settlers settling in Arkansas. When the Treaty of Neosho is signed, the federal government goes back and tells them, oh, your people's coming out to meet you. You need to move a little bit further west. So they're in what's now Oklahoma. It was not Oklahoma back then.
Right.
And so they combined the Chickamaugans, the old settlers, with the Cherokees. Well, the Cherokee Nation is many more people than what the old settlers were. So they basically take over. And later on, the old settlers would later become the third band of the Cherokees, what we call the Catoonis. And they were the people that originally left out there. They were descendants of Dragon Canoe and the Chickamaugans that had left earlier. It's really strange. They gave them the same land that they promised the Cherokee Nation. Imagine that.
Yeah.
More government double talk.
Yeah. Well, I've got a list here of Trail of Tears losses by party.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like one man seemed to have lost more of his than others.
Lost a lot.
Right. That was was anybody ever put in jail for any of this? Nobody was ever. They should have been.
There's an account where that some of the missionaries and stuff were complaining that went with them because some of the white people were actually giving them giving them alcohol. One young boy died of alcohol poisoning, basically, from being there. So many sad. Talks about there's some about where a mother had passed away. They wouldn't even let them bury her till the end of the day, and then the ground was frozen. All they could do was put rocks on top of her. I mean, it's all stuck in the tears. They were stuck in the camps for all the summer with nothing. I'm talking about the film at New Echota talks about it being they had a sky for a blanket and the earth for a pillow.
Right.
The sanitation was poor in those camps.
And they didn't take food for them?
No. They were fed the food that they were supposed to eat on the Trail of Tears, and so by the time they left, they were starving.
Right.
And they had to, a lot of people say, well, I've got Cherokee kinfolks up in Illinois. How did they get up there? Well, the northern route went through Illinois, and if your people were starving, there's somebody there to make you stay with that. You go off and look for food for your family. You took care of your family. Everybody, that's just common sense. Why we don't give these people common sense, I have no idea. But they were much more smarter than a whole lot of us.
Right.
The literacy rate, believe it or not, was higher for the Cherokee Nation than it was for the state of Georgia at that time period. It's hard to believe.
Well,
John Ross thought he was saving his people by making them wait. He thought he could use the white man's laws to keep his people here, but the government, it's all politics like we talked about before. The government, they were not going to let him do that. And now the Treaty Party got blamed for everything because they broke that Cherokee law. It was illegal for any Cherokee to sell land for the white man. On June 22nd, 1839, soldiers rode out, 75 soldiers, and they rode out and they killed Major Ridge. He was ambushed, shot 5 times, is the way the story goes. His son, John Ridge, was thrown up in the air and stabbed repeatedly. And Elias Bootnott, the editor of the newspaper, him and Worcester was helping rebuild a house. Worcester was helping him rebuild a house. A group of Cherokees came up and asked for some medicine. Went back to the woods and they ambushed him and killed him. Now, he was stabbed 20-something times. I'm not sure exactly what the exact amount was, but I have seen the knife that they used. It looks like a kitchen knife. It's not a big old camping knife like you'd see in a movie, or a Jim Bowie knife or something like that.
Keep it?
It's a small. It's in a museum in Oklahoma.
Museum?
Yeah, they brought it up to Major Ridge's house years ago with my friend Debbie Brown.
In a way, you think, why would you keep something like that?
Well, they said when it was. See, John Ross did not know they were going to kill those people, according to what we've been told, and how his son was supposed to keep John Ross busy, and the people that killed those that was the last thing to do. The window was open there, and they were supposed to throw that knife through the window to let them know it was done with.
Wow. And they just kept it as a
museum,
souvenir.
as a souvenir.
You know. Okay. All right.
It's just amazing. It's just so much history. We've covered so much today, and it's 10 minutes late.
I know it.
And
It's gone fast.
I know it really has.
Yes. But
We got time for me to play my song.
we do, and I hope you don't mind. I've been sitting here holding your guitar.
No,
for
I'm glad you did. It's better than me trying to get up and move it, you know.
All right, let's see if we can get you situated
Alrighty,
here
we'll
without
try.
me putting a dent in it.
It's already got a hole in it. We won't talk about that. Everybody says it's a bullet hole.
That's battle scars.
Yeah.
It's a character.
Can you hear the guitar pretty good? It sounds pretty good to me. I don't think I'm overpowering it on the guitar. There's a lady named Kim Baldridge, and she helped me at the library. I worked at New Echota, like I said. I started in August of 2000, and my friends in Rome kept asking me how long it was going to be before I wrote a song about the Cherokee people, and I said, well, first of all, most of my songs come from stories, and I needed a story. And Kim brought me this story from a group of children that had written this story about an old Cherokee man that was being gathered up during a removal. And he turned to the soldiers, the men with the bayonets, and he said, you may take my people from their homelands, but you'll never wash our names from your waters. And the old man's prophecy came true. Because you see right there above New Echota, there's a river called the Coosawhattie. And running right beside it and parallels another river called the Conasauga. And right there across from New Echota, where the golf course is today, it makes another river called the Oostanala. And the Oostanala flows down to Rome, where I live at. And it joins up with that river that comes down through Cartersville, the old Etowah River. And it makes the Coosa River, and it flows into Alabama. And that's where this song came from. And they left their names on the waters, and you'll never wash them away. Cherokee people have gone from their homelands. Cherokee names, they still remain. You know, through this world I've rambled. I've seen lots of funny men. Some will rob you with a big gun, and some with a feather pen. And they left their names on the waters, and you'll never wash them away. Cherokee people have gone from their homelands. Cherokee names, they still remain. Chattahoochee. Conasauga. Coosawhattie. Oostanala. Etowah. Roll on, mighty Coosa. You know, about halfway through Alabama, the Tallapoosa River goes over and joins up with the Coosa, and it makes the river they call the Alabama River that goes all the way into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, I've got a cousin that lives down in Pensacola, and he's Cherokee. His mother was Cherokee, and he said his mother told him that the reason the beaches down there was so beautiful was because of all the quartz that washed down where the Cherokees used to live up in the mountains of North Carolina and East Tennessee. Well, now I don't know if that story's true or not, but it sure adds another part of this story of this song I'm singing in. And no matter how many times the flag flies, or how many Columbus days, you'll never wash their names from the waters. Cherokee names still remain. Cherokee names, they still remain. The Cherokee spirit, it still remains. Wado. There's a symbol at Etowah's. We call it the water spider. And during the 1830s, out there when they first discovered it, the people in Cartersville didn't know what it was when they saw that. The Tumlin family owned that property out there. You know, that was originally called the Tumlin Mounds.
Yes.
They won it in the Indian Land Lottery of 1832, moved there in 38, and they farmed it all the way to the early 1950s. And in the 1830s, the land flooded out there around the mounds. You know, Mound A is the second largest Mississippian platform mound in the world. Cahokia up in Illinois is actually the largest. And they found some of those symbols out there carved on the shells that came from the coast. From the East Coast they found, because these people had extensive trade routes. They found, Vicki, believe it or not, asphalt that came from California out there. Had to be La Brea tar pits.
It had to be.
That's the only place. Nobody's making
Right.
asphalt that time. Obsidian from Wyoming. All these other places. But anyway, they found this symbol out there of the water spider. This is a spider with a cross in the middle of it, and what we've been told, the little X on it, it actually means fire. It's a symbol for fire. And the Cherokees took that symbol, and they created a story about how they got fire. Now the story goes, a long time ago, there was a great storm that came up and struck this tree. And it caught on fire across from the island. And the Cherokee people were cold. And back then the animals, they could talk to one another. And the animals could talk to the human beings. And they all talked about being cold. And the animals said, we'll go over there and get that fire for you. But we don't know how. We're going to have to figure it out. So the black bear, he swam over, got up there next to that fire. Well, you know what happened. It turned him black. And he came back over. Well, the old crow, he was brown at that time. He flew over, looked down into where that fire was, where the lightning struck that tree, and it turned him black. Well, raccoon, he was a little bit smarter. He crawled over there across the water, looked up in there, looked down the fire, and he looked real quick, and it burned a mask around his face. And he turned around right quick, and it burned a ring around his tail. The little water spiders tell him the whole time, I can do this if you'll just let me go. I said, you're just a water spider. You can't do anything. She said, yes, I can. I can if you'll just let me. All the other animals started. The rat snake went over and it turned him black and came black. The black garter snake we see today. So many of the other animals went over and they weren't able to get the fire. They kept failing. And finally, Bear said, Yona, that's what they call Bear in Cherokee. Yona said, little water spider, it's your turn. You can go. And she carefully floated across the water. And while she did, she turned over, and on her back, she took her web and she wove a tiny little bow. And in that tiny little bow, she scraped off a little ember and put it in that bow. And she swam back across. And that's how the Cherokees got their fire. That's where, and also, the Cherokees tell us today, that's where their ceramics came from, too. It's from Mother Water Spider, bringing them back the fire away from where it struck the lightning. It struck the tree on the islands over there.
See, I knew you'd have a good story.
Well, this sounds like an old one. On my CD, on the Songs and Stories CD, I'll play a little bit of this one. It's called the Fatback Blues. Now, y'all know what fatback is. That's that stuff they cook up.
Okay, in case we go out.
Yeah, just go out. We'll fade out
with Gary playing.
That'd be
Then
fine.
we are not having a show next week. We will be off July the 4th. We will be back July the 11th. And now, Mr. Gary Greene.
My daddy loved Jimmy Rogers, and he loved the blues too. And when we recorded this, the guys helped me sound like we were doing a thing in the Sun Studios. This is on the Reverb Nation. You can actually go in there and listen to this song. It's called the Fatback Blues. It's like every other blues song you've ever heard in your life. With a twist. Well, they call me the Fatback. Lord, I ain't no strickling. Said they call me the Fatback, Lord. I ain't no strickling. I might be a little bit salty. Got what them good gals they need, yes sir. Well, a woman I'm a-loving, she's just my height and size. Good grief, y'all. Said a woman I'm a-loving, she's just my height and size. She's a married woman. Come and sees me sometime. I didn't tell him she's married to me. The woman I'm a-loving, Lord, she got the meanest dog in town. Yes, ma'am. Said the woman I'm a-loving, she's got the meanest dog in town. Got teeth like Michael Tyson. Weighs about 269 pounds. That's a big dog, y'all.
Mr. Gary Greene, people.
Thank y'all very much. Pleasure to be here.